Hello and welcome to the program. I'm your host, Ron Whitlock. The state of Texas ranks 46th in the nation in spending $8,998 per student, whereas the national average is $11,674 per student. Despite the huge economy in the state of Texas, we're not investing in our population in the public schools of the state of Texas. What's going to be done this legislative session? Only 1 in 5 Texas students earn a higher education degree. 1 in 10 Hispanics do not earn a higher education degree. Something needs to be done, and we're going to do some interviews here on this program today with 2 Texas state senators, members of the Hispanic Caucus. They are Jose Rodriguez, Chairman, and Vice Chairman Sylvia Garcia. And we have with us on the program Sylvia Garcia, Senator and Vice Chair of the Hispanic Caucus, now from Houston, but born and raised in Palito Blanco, south of Alice, Texas.
Just down the road.
Just down the road.
Just down the road.
Be viewed by the your family members on Fox 38 in Corpus Christi, and also any who live closer to the border on Televisa. Welcome to the telecast.
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you for joining us and giving us some time before going and catching your flight back home. Now, being in South Texas, born and bred, an educated person, now living in Houston, what similarities do you see predominantly from the problems that were dealt with by Forest San Alamo and keynote speaker Dr. Daniel King today, and what you might want to try and get accomplished in the next session of the legislature that might enable you to use some of what you've learned, and we've all learned as a society from Dr. King and his successes here at the border region in your district in Houston?
Well, you know, that's what's really, truly amazing is that no matter where we go, there are so many common threads. And on education, that's really the big one, because we've had summits, and we had our 5th and final one in South Texas, but we've also been to El Paso, we've been to Dallas, we've been to San Antonio, we've been to Houston, but the priorities are the same. You know, the little sub-tweaking is a little bit different, but the biggest priority for everyone is education. Second is probably health care. And then it's immigration reform, it's civic engagement, and it's about economic opportunities. So we're all the same Latinos. We may look a little different. I'm Weta. You know, there's others that are different than don't look like me, but you know, we all have the common surnames, we've got the common language, we've got the common culture, and we've got the common values. And that starts with, you know, keeping our families together and making sure that our children are well educated and that they're well prepared for the future. So I think that's what brings us all together. So I was delighted to see some of the statistics that Dr. King shared with us. Because it certainly demonstrates that the Rio Grande Valley and South Texas are well prepared to take their place in Texas' future.
In particular, the model that he talked about at this summit, from trying to move, that's what his objectives, to move from our current emphasis in the state of Texas on standardized testing and move it to post-secondary completion as the main driver for education rather than testing.
Well, you're right, and I was really pleased to hear him say that over 50% of his graduates from high school leave high school with dual credits in the local community college. That's wonderful, and I think we need to pursue more dual credit classes. I really was also very encouraged to hear him talk about the learning centers that he's established for the parents, because we're finding that in the pre-K and early years, if the child is having difficulty with reading, you know, they're not going to be able to get the parental support at home if they can't read at the level that the child needs to be reading, or they can't read in English. So I think his approach to not only focus on the children, but also assisting parents is one that needs to be followed throughout the state. And I think the focus that he's got on preparing the kids for transitioning to workforce, junior college or college, giving them the options is the right one. And the big one, of course, is to get away from the reliance on so much testing. As he said, we can train the best test takers in the world, but that doesn't mean they're going to be able to go out there and get a real job and be a part of the Texas economy and be a part of contributing to our great state.
Senator Garcia, born and raised and educated initially in public ed in those areas in Palito Blanco and south of Valence, Texas. Oil patch. Allen's was the oil patch, and now all South Texas
All
is
of South
becoming
Texas, it's everywhere.
the oil
And that's
patch.
good for Texas.
Oh, absolutely. And now we're told on this telecast that $1.7 trillion in economic activity are going to happen in the next 10 years, the next decade, here in the border region, Laredo to Corpus Christi, south to Brownsville, and in the Gulf of Mexico. And unless something gets done for education in this session, we're going to be 2 years into that decade before the legislature meets next time. So what kinds of things can you take as a model for PSJA and use in your position as Texas State Senator in the Hispanic Caucus as a group, trying to make sure that these jobs from Eagle Ford and the 8 times Eagle Ford and Burgos and everything in the Gulf go to our students and our people rather than somebody from out of state?
Well, I think you've hit it right on the nose. I think we need to make sure that our kids are prepared for those jobs, and we need to make sure that those jobs stay in our state. I think any time that if Texas does business with an out-of-state company that's coming in, that's one of the things we need to tell them. Yes, you can come and we want your business, but we want to make sure that your business is about jobs for our kids and keeping our jobs here locally. But I've been very, very pleased with all the work that's being done in South Texas. Every time I come down here, I feel like I'm entering another part of South Texas I haven't seen, because it's growing and it's revitalizing, and I think it's becoming a lot more compassionate, and I think that's good for everybody.
Any members of your family been engaged in the oil patch through the years that now they can see that next generations need to necessarily look at that as a good future, not a declining future?
Well, I grew up poor in South Texas, so I'm, pick cotton, and, we're basically, farm kids, and that's not something we ever did, but this next generation, we do have, I have a niece that's married to someone who's really involved in the oil patch, and I've got a couple of nephews that are involved in the sort of the truck driving and other parts of it. So
$2,000 a week to drive a truck on the Eagle Ford.
Well, and there's a lot of issues that we're facing next session having to do with the damage to roads and the amount of traffic and some issues. But
it's not like the money's not there to do it.
Well, and they always say that with growth comes some pains, and we'll work through those pains, and we just have to be open this next session to making the changes that are needed to embrace the economy that's here, and to make sure that we've got a good infrastructure to embrace that change and make sure that it's productive and that it's good for all of us.
Is it easy to explain the reality that Eagle Ford Shale is putting billions into the state coffers by virtue of all the activity? Why not take some of that money that's destroying the roadways and curtailing Eagle Ford Shale by the roads being declining from 60 mile an hour to gravel? Don't you keep some of the money in South Texas from Eagle Ford Shale and rebuild the road?
Well,
is that too simplistic?
Well, it might be, but I can tell you as someone who was a county commissioner in Harris County for 8 years and have built a lot of roads and overseen a lot of infrastructure work, it takes a lot to get there, but I think it's one of those things that, we're going to have to talk about that, and we're going to have to consider all the factors. So I think that we'll come up with a good solution. The proposition that was on the ballot for roads that did pass, and I think everybody who voted for it, was a great start. But TxDOT needs a lot of more money to be able to do all the work that they need to do around the state, and we're going to be about the business of tackling some of those issues.
For the remainder of the time we have during this segment now, we want to go back one more time to what you learned, we all learned from Dr. King at his speech here today. It all started with him reading the 2006 Texas legislative mandate requiring Texas students be offered the opportunity to earn at least 12 college hours while in high school. He found that and implemented that. Is that the place to start this session, to go back and look at that 2006, which caused PSJA to get and do what it has done and take and improve that legislation? Is that?
Oh, absolutely. And once again, congratulations to Dr. King and the school district, because I've not heard those kind of great results from any one school district, and I come from an area that's got lots of school districts, and I think this is something that we should all strive for, and yes, that's where we start and we build on it, and I'm sure that everyone will be committed to doing that.
First grade classes in most of the major metropolitan areas are predominantly Mexican American, same in Houston? Yes?
Same in Houston, yes, and for us in Houston, it's in some pockets, it's not only Mexican American, but sometimes other than Mexican American, because we have a very diverse population in Houston, and it includes a lot of people from El Salvador, from Nicaragua, from Venezuela, from all parts of the world. So yes, I think we're finding that all the elementary schools in particular have a great majority of minority students. That's throughout our school district, and that is true now for the state of Texas and many states around the country.
Even Republicans on the border are concerned about our new Lieutenant Governor, Dan Patrick, the CEO of the Texas Senate, because he has voted against the last two budgets because the cuts to education and health care were not deep enough. So, and he was a senator from Houston, he voted against the two budgets because those two budgets, healthcare and education, which are so predominantly funneling needed money on from San Antonio I-10 south to the Rio Grande River, what kind of a lieutenant governor is he going to be, and are you going to be able to work with him to try and get?
Well, I tell you what, I think that's the million-dollar question. I think everyone's asking that question, and we're just going to have to wait and see. I've known the governor, Lieutenant Governor-elect, for a long time. I am from Houston. I've appeared on his radio show. I've appeared on his TV show. And I think that once elected and once he takes that oath, it changes everything. So I'll be there watching just like you to just see how open he's going to be to working with all interests down in the Senate. And I look forward to being one of those that gets to sit across the table from him and look at all these tough issues, because in the end, we all have to do what's best for Texas.
Senator Sylvia Garcia, Houston, thank you for appearing on the telecast. We'll be back in a moment, so stay tuned. Hello and welcome to the program. Your host, Ron Whitlock. The Texas Senate Hispanic Caucus meeting with its regional summit along the border region of South Texas, and we have with us at this time Senator Jose Rodriguez, chairman of the Hispanic Caucus of the Texas Senate from El Paso, but born in Alice, so people viewing on Fox 38 can say, hometown boy, born in Alice, but raised in Alamo, far south one Alamo?
That's exactly right. I
Man,
was born in
telling you.
Alice and then moved to Alamo at a very young age as a baby and grew up in Alamo, went to PSJA High School, proud Bear,
Wow.
and then to Pan American back in the days when it was Pan American College and then Pan American University.
Wow.
And so I really had all my formative years right here in the valley, working in the fields, picking cotton, doing everything that kids did after school to stay ahead, and made it out to law school in Washington, D.C. So
Let's get down to business, because the people are
Sure.
wondering what you're going to do as chairman of the Hispanic Caucus of the Texas Senate, because this session of the legislature may be brutal. We just don't have any idea what it's going to face. We being I-10 to the Rio Grande River. We're D's on this side. We're young. We're Mexican American. We're middle to low income. The northern half of the state is just the opposite. It's more Anglo. It's more mid-upscale. It's older, high 30s, low 40s in some cases. And how do we get our funding? How do we make sure we get our funding for education and healthcare? Because those are the big ones for the border region. So we can get educated in healthcare in order to go work on the north.
Yes.
Take care and send doctors and nurses to the northern half of the state.
Well, Ron, I think it's to everyone's benefit, regardless of where you live in the state, to invest in education, especially for those of us here along the border, and invest in healthcare. Why? Because the demographer, Steve Murdoch's name came up in our discussion today, who's now a professor in Rice, has been saying for many, many years that the fastest, youngest growing population is right along the border, mainly Hispanic, the future labor force of the United States, much less Texas. And that unless we invest in their education, provide them with access to health care so they can be healthy workers, then the state won't be able to compete in the world's economy. It's as simple as that. So I would say to the folks north of I-35, north of I-10, that their future depends on the future of those of us south of I-35.
So, your challenge is going to be what with Lieutenant Governor Patrick? You worked with him
Yes.
as a senator from Houston, now you're working with him as Lieutenant Governor. Are you concerned because he voted against the last two budgets as senator because the health care and education butts weren't deep enough? Now he's the leader of the entire Senate for the entire state. Do you think what he was doing and voting basically in concert with the Tea Party part of his party, is he going to mediate in some way with you?
I am hopeful that now that he's lieutenant governor, he's going to be a statesman, which I think is called for when you're in that kind of a leadership position.
Yeah.
You're not any longer just representing a certain part of the state, a certain interest in the state. You represent all the people of the state. And he's a very smart man. He was a chairman of education. He understands the numbers. Since that vote that he took, we've had a state district judge declare the state educational finance system unconstitutional, yet for a sixth time. And it's on appeal now. It's going to be on appeal to the Texas Supreme Court. But the judge, in that opinion, very clearly says that Texas is not adequately funding the education for all the children of this state, particularly those who are English language learners, disadvantaged students, at-risk students, bilingual students. So that's a very strong message.
South Texas.
South
all those
Texas.
things they put in South Texas.
Yes, exactly.
So did the judge say predominantly South Texas had bigger needs in education?
No, he didn't refer to predominantly South Texas. He referred to English language learners, disadvantaged students, at-risk students, special needs students. So,
Yeah.
those are predominantly located down here in South
Didn't say
Texas.
Hispanic students, but that's predominantly what the.
Well, he
where
referred
they
to
fall.
bilingual education and English language
Exactly,
learners, so he's
exactly.
talking about Spanish language students.
Well, the good news, according to Murdoch, if we do that and we transition and we do what's happening in PSJ, your alma mater, and do it on a statewide basis, voila, we're going to have the solutions and the educated workforce that we need going forward in the state of Texas, and not have to import workers, as it were, by virtue of Eagle Ford Shale ×4 with Burgos and what's going to happen on the Gulf with exploration, and we're going to get into that in the next session, so
All right.
stay tuned. We'll be right back.
All
and
right.
We'll ask you about that.
All right.
Welcome back to our program, coming to you from the Regional Summit of the Texas Senate Hispanic Caucus. We have its chairman, Jose Rodriguez, PSJ graduate, and now from El Paso. Senator, thank you for sticking by for
Thank
one
you.
more
Thank you
segment
for having
before you
me.
have to go to your, visit your family in
Alamo.
In Alamo. You're going
Yes.
to have to get in your car and drive for about 6 minutes in order to do that. Now, PSJ's superintendent comes into a very sick and broken district and has just totally turned it on its head, graduating rates of 93%, unbelievable. Now, his suggestion to the legislature this session is to move from our current emphasis at the Capitol and with laws from standardized testing to post-secondary completion as the main driver for public education. What do you think about that suggestion?
Well, first of all, let me say this. What Superintendent King has done in my alma mater, PSJA, is transformational, amazing.
Amazing.
I think he has set the pace for the rest of the state as to what we can do, particularly with disadvantaged, at-risk students, to ensure that they acquire the education that they need in order to succeed in today's economy. And so he is doing a tremendous job at PSJA, and I wholeheartedly agree with his approach. our focus on standardized tests.
How can you disagree with success?
Well, right.
Yeah.
Right. We've had interim committee hearings with Senator Patrick as the chair of the Education Committee, now Lieutenant Governor-elect, and he understands that we've gone too far with standardized tests. He's made some comments during some of those hearings that somehow there was a disconnect between what the kids were actually learning and what was being measured by the standardized test. We had kid after kid and their parents come and say, he's an A student, he gets nothing but A's in class. He's been recognized, and yet when he takes those standardized tests, he somehow can't make it. So the measuring stick is at a disconnect. And I think what Superintendent King has done is said, look, you measure success by the actual performance of the student over a period of time, and particularly if you set the goal of having them learn not only to get a high school education, but a college education at the same time through those dual programs and through the early college programs that he's implemented. And then how can you quarrel with the success rates that he has in the number of graduates, in the number of dropouts going down, in the number of kids actually going on to college and graduating from college? I mean, he has got a tremendous success model for us to emulate in the rest of the state. So I, for one, am going to be wanting to push what's happened here at PSJA in the next session of the legislature, because I think we have a model that we can go on.
Tell the audience we went to the break that we were going to talk a little bit about the fact that we understand that only 5% of the operating rigs in the Gulf of Mexico are Mexican rigs. So as part of this revolution, transformational energy reform that they've done in the neighboring country of Mexico, it's going to require money, a lot of money. That's going to have to be international and U.S. companies, plus the technology is going to be required. And so the attitude is, at this point, Pemex is going to turn that over in a big way. Secondarily, también, with the gas just on the other side from your former community of Alamo, where you were born and raised, that also is going to be something that predominantly will be privatized and so forth, because Pemex is interested in the oil, and that's basically from Roma north to Laredo on the other side. So we're going to have something done by this session, because $1.7 trillion in economic activity over the next decade. We're going to be 2 years into that before the legislature meets in 2017.
Yes. Well, there's no question. Look, I have actually gone to a meeting of border legislators down in Monterrey this year, earlier this year, to talk about the energy reforms in Mexico. We had one of the assistant secretaries for the new energy department, and talk about exactly what you just pointed out, that they are going to need funding, they're going to need equipment, they're going to need our expertise that we have developed in the Eagle Ford Shale and the Barnett Shale up in Fort Worth.
Yeah.
And they're going to be dependent in many ways on us teaching them how you engage in this fracking technology technique that has resulted in all of this oil and gas production. And one of the things that I learned is that the Eagle Ford Shale goes under the Rio Grande into the northern states of Mexico, Tamaulipas, Coahuila, and Nuevo León. And now I'm hearing all the way up to Chihuahua, to Ojinaga even.
Wow.
And that is twice the amount of reserves that we have on our side. So you can imagine the tremendous opportunity that Mexico has to improve the economics of the nation and its people, and at the same time, the subsidiary impact that's going to have on our side, because we are going to benefit. The Valley is going to be one of the winners in Mexico's development of its energy fields. And so I think that a lot of our kids ought to be thinking of, I would recommend going to college and seeking an engineering degree, a chemist degree, a degree that is tied to the energy field, because that's where a big part of the future lies. The second area that has nothing to do with the energy is, of course, the healthcare industry. And I think now that we're getting a medical school here in the Valley, as we did in El Paso several years ago, is a tremendous opportunity for our young people to acquire knowledge in the health-related professions, to meet not only the health professional shortage, doctors, nurses, dentists, pharmacists that we lack in underserved areas like border communities, like the Rio Grande Valley and El Paso, but also great-paying jobs, clean jobs.
Well,
Great opportunities for research on Hispanic health, on border diseases. You know, we who live on the border have a lot to offer to the rest of the state and the nation. And I am an optimist, Ron. I think that, as I told the young people in the audience today, really the sky's the limit. It's up to you. If a kid like me, as a farm worker, can be a state senator, why can't anybody else?
no question,
No question.
no question.
Got it.
Chairman,
Yes, sir.
Texas Senator, Hispanic Caucus, Texas
Thank you.
Senator from El Paso. Thank you for joining us here on the telecast from South Texas College Mid-Valley Campus in Weslaco, where we attended today the regional summit of the Hispanic Caucus of the Texas Senate. Thank you for joining us, Senator, along with Senator Garcia. Thank you for watching us. You can also watch it online 24/7 at ronwhitlockreport.com. Thank you for joining us. Till next time, adios.